rescue missions. While we diligently uphold their legal obligations and moral duty, states must assume their own responsibilities. Our industry never truly sails through calm waters. We have always lived with the perils of the sea. They come with the job. But today's multiple risks go far beyond them. Shipping is increasingly being weaponized economically, politically, and physically. Piracy is not a distant memory. It is evolving, not retreating. It poses constant risks to vessels, crews, and cargoes. In 2024, 116 incidents were reported, recording about 50% increase from the previous year. Geopolitical conflict and political instability are growingly endangering security at sea. An unprecedented number of commercial vessels have been attacked with military weapons, missiles, bombs, torpedoes, mines, drones. Crew members have been killed or taken hostage. Ships and cargoes have been lost. Organized crime at sea, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, human trafficking is also a growing threat that exposes the vulnerability of ships to crimes beyond the industry's control, leading to its unfair penalization. And now, a new frontier of danger has emerged: cyber warfare. A single cyber attack can disrupt vessel operations, compromise safety at sea, leak sensitive commercial data, or even trigger environmental disasters. In addition, the growing misuse by criminal networks of artificial intelligence and digital tracking technologies turn vessels into highly visible sitting ducks for targeted attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, we as an industry work tirelessly to safeguard maritime security. We constantly update our industry's best management practices, strictly adhere to global security regulations, cooperate closely with naval forces in high-risk regions, even when necessary, adopt self-protecting measures, such as placing armed guards aboard civilian merchant vessels. Responding swiftly and effectively to changing conditions is a hard fact of our job. But to have to resort to our people's own resourcefulness to deal on the spot with potentially fatal security emergencies should certainly not be part of it. While our industry is resilient, it cannot and should not be expected to carry every burden alone. Its resilience should never be assumed. It should be assured. A global commitment is needed to keep maritime security as a high priority and the standing policy issue within the United Nations, to embrace a coherent, comprehensive, and coordinated maritime security governance, to include the shipping industry's valuable experience and know-how when addressing old and new maritime security threats. In this dynamic maritime security landscape, we must shift from reaction to prevention, from crisis response to crisis readiness. I would use the Greek word synergy to describe how maritime security should be treated. It cannot be achieved in silos. We recognize and applaud the United Nations' steadfast commitment to solidarity and global cooperation, and we praise the personal engagement of Secretary-General António Guterres in this regard. We all need to embody the spirit of the United Nations in its truest form, standing together, not just in name, but in purpose. We need to collectively defend freedom of navigation as a shared global responsibility and the cornerstone of peace and humanity. The seas must be open, free, safe, and secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Etraoglou, for your briefing. And I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Christian Wüger, professor at the University of Copenhagen and research fellow at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary-General, distinguished ministers, excellencies, members of the Security Council, guardians of our shared oceans. At the outset, allow me to express my gratitude to Greece for convening the high-level open debate and for the invitation to participate. In 2021, a single ship, the Ever Given, that you might know, blocked the Suez Canal for just 6 days, costing the global economy billions and disrupting supply chains worldwide. This stark reminder of our maritime vulnerability underscores a critical truth. Never before in history have we been as dependent on the sea as we are today. The data are clear. Since the 1990s, our use of the sea has been massively accelerating, with maritime trade, for instance, increasing by 300% and nearly 60% of global oil and gas supplies transported across the oceans. This expansion leads to new threats and vulnerabilities. Maritime security is a vital component of international security and peace. It is about protecting the lifeline of the global economy, trade, communications, and ensuring access to energy and food for billions of people worldwide. Over the past 2 decades, this reality has increasingly been reflected in the Council's meeting agenda. Threats to peace and security ranging from transnational blue crimes such as piracy, sanction violations, armed attacks on shipping, and the spillover of conflict from land have recurrently featured in Council discussions. However, as discussed at the 2021 high-level open debate on maritime security, the Council has been dealing with these issues in an ad hoc manner. There are no sustained efforts to address maritime security systematically. Consequently, many emerging issues lack adequate attention. Today presents an opportunity for the Council to lay out pathways for meaningful change and recalibrating our collective efforts. Mr. President, in 2024, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research launched a new work stream on maritime security. As part of this, I had the pleasure to lead a first comprehensive assessment of global maritime security and how the United Nations system can address it more effectively. Allow me to highlight 4 key insights from our research. First, despite significant international efforts, blue crimes such as piracy and smuggling persist, and they continue to undermine regional stability. The resurgence of piracy off the coast of Somalia last year, previously believed to be contained, serves as an important reminder that our efforts in combating crimes at sea must be sustainable. Specifically, small island states and states recovering from war need ongoing, not intermittent support. Second, our report details a set of arising maritime security challenges: the proliferation of autonomous weapon systems, naval mines, maritime cybersecurity threats, substandard shipping linked to sanction evasion, and the need to protect critical maritime infrastructures such as internet cables or green energy platforms, all require sustained and systematic attention. Third, there's a strong need for evidence-based decision-making. We need a clear understanding of where maritime security threats are evolving, where they are escalating, and how they can be addressed. Yet, so far, we lack such evidence on a global level. The ongoing World Ocean Assessment, to give but one example, barely considers maritime security. New initiatives such as the International Platform for Ocean Sustainability that will be launched at the UN Ocean Conference in Nice this year likewise do not address security dimensions. We launched the UNIDIR Maritime Security Workstream to assist, but more efforts are needed. Fourth, it is our conclusion that the United Nations system's approach to maritime security needs recalibration and streamlining. There is no global strategy and no coordination instrument in place. More than 22 agencies address aspects of maritime security under different mandates. This includes what we call in the report the Big Five: the International Maritime Organization, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the UN Environment Programme, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and the International Organization for Migration. None of these has a comprehensive mandate. This implies there's a high risk of duplication and reduced effectiveness in capacity building. The Council, therefore, should consider supporting and synchronizing coordination, information sharing, and strategic thinking. This could be done through a standing item on the Council agenda. The Women, Peace and Security agenda, for instance, might serve as a useful template. The Council should also consider creating the Office of a Special Rapporteur. This would enable the UN as a whole to address maritime security more consistently and also ensure that capacity building becomes more effective. As the waters that connect us face growing threats, our response must be equally connected. The security of our oceans is not merely a matter of protecting shipping lanes. It is about safeguarding our shared ocean future. I urge the members of the Council to chart a course toward a more systematic, evidence-based and coordinated maritime security governance. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Wigger, for your briefing and for your very concrete suggestions. And I shall now make a statement in my capacity as Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. Secretary-General, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, thank you for joining us here today for this open debate on maritime security. Let me start by expressing my appreciation for the role of the United Nations in this very important issue. This is the right place to have a discussion on maritime security. The United Nations is at the center of international efforts to protect and preserve our oceans. It is, as the Secretary-General pointed out, the custodian of the International Convention on the Law of the Seas, and it is the locus of international cooperation to address global challenges that affect us all. And I would like to personally commend Secretary-General Guterres for his tireless efforts on the matter, and thank him again for his presence with us here today. Threats to maritime security are indeed of global dimension. They affect all nations, whether coastal or landlocked. As Mrs. Stravlou pointed out, maritime security is critical for the safety of our global supply chains. More than 80% of the volume of international trade is carried by shipping, and a secure maritime domain promotes global political stability, economic stability, including price stability, sustainable development, and the well-being of all people. And we are increasingly encountering asymmetrical maritime threats, such as smuggling, terrorism, piracy, but also hybrid attacks, which equally affect ship connections, but also ports. And at the same time, rising sea levels and extreme weather conditions may distort both port operations and shipping routes. Global problems need global solutions, and threat to maritime security are no different. We can only address them through effective international cooperation, whether at state level, at the level of international organizations, or at the level of the private sector. It is clear that we need to do more, and such efforts should place emphasis on 6 key areas. First, we need to have an increased maritime domain awareness, effective understanding of anything associated with the maritime domain that could impact security, safety, the economy of the marine environment. This requires that we improve global education and information sharing mechanisms, that we integrate new technologies to improve our surveillance capabilities, communication and information sharing, and artificial intelligence should be part of this project, and having in mind the potential dangers that it may connote. Second, we must tackle unsafe and illicit shipping practices that pose a serious threat to global trade, but also to the marine environment. These include fraudulent activities related to registration in the maritime sector, substandard shipping, sanctions, evasion, but also phenomena such as shadow fleets, to which Greece, my country, shows no tolerance. Once again, coordination and prevention are the key issues in order to improve monitoring and enhance the effective implementation of relative international instruments. And this macroscopic vision is the only effective one that we have in this respect. Third, enhancing capacity building, including law enforcement capacities in the field of navigation, ports and connectivity, is key to combating security threats. The Secretary-General referred to the situation in the Red Sea during the last years is a typical case of a serious maritime threat that may reasonably result in the increase of prices for essential goods, and this is something that affects all of us. And collective action in these cases is inevitable. My country's strong engagement in the matter is demonstrated by the leading role Greece has assumed in the EU naval operation Aspides, but also in the operations Atalanta and Irini. And capacity building should equally focus on promoting safe and resilient ports, as well as addressing cybersecurity issues. And this should include the development of digital skills in the wider range of the maritime cluster, including the supply chains. And by all means, very important, freedom of electricity and data connectivity via submarine cables. This is something, Mr. Secretary-General, that should be non-negotiable. And for this is a prerequisite for a diversified, high-quality, affordable energy and data connectivity. This is a critical issue for the entire world. Fourth, the reinforcement of the legal framework is again essential. In this respect, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, sets out the basis for global governance at sea in order to address current but also emerging security threats. UNCLOS basically reflects international customary law and must be altogether respected. We also need to further enhance the work of the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, especially with reference to international rulemaking and the protection of the seas. More effective coordination is required for the various offices currently operating under the auspices of the United Nations, as Mr. Büger pointed out. Fifth, the environmental dimension, which is also a security challenge. The implications of climate change and environmental degradation multiply existing threats and have a wider effect on global stability. We must work to counter marine pollution and the environmental risks to our security posed by illegal dumping, discharges, anthropogenic emissions in violation of international standards. And the salvage of the tanker Sunion in the Red Sea last year was a case in point, one which prevented a huge environmental but also humanitarian catastrophe, highlighting the global dimension of maritime security and its far-reaching repercussions. And last year we hosted in Athens the 9th Our Ocean Conference, whereby more than 100 delegations made over 400 pledges exceeding $10 billion in value. And 6, we should not disregard the need to enhance the protection and security of the 2 million seafarers who secure international maritime transport and uninterrupted operation of global trade. As an old maritime motto underlines, without them, half of the world would freeze and half of the world would starve. And having in mind the recent extreme risks to which they have been exposed, from the pandemic to war hostilities to terrorist attacks, we must keep in mind that their well-being and their continuous training in new operational modes is necessary for maritime safety. Dear colleagues, maritime security is directly and closely related to the core values of the free world. No one could really enjoy the well-established principles of the freedom of the seas, nor the related freedom to commerce and trade, ensuring economic and peaceful interconnection without the prerequisite of maritime security. And today, I'm happy to realize, by the wide participation of member states in this debate, that we share the view about its utmost importance. Greece is the country with the largest merchant maritime fleet in the world. It's a maritime nation with a rich and deep seafaring history. Thousands of islands, one of the world's longest coastlines, a real cross-trading nation connecting and contributing to the supply of decades of third countries. And for us, Greeks, the sea has always been part of our identity, and I'm privileged to be able to participate in this discussion. And before you, I wish to make a firm commitment that the country I'm honored to represent, Greece, will remain the guardian of the freedom of navigation, hand in hand with all United Nations, UN nations. We will work together for this very important cause during our Security Council tenure and beyond. And thank you for your presence here today. And I resume my functions as President of the Council. And I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Carlos Arturo Hoyos, the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Panama.
Señor Presidente,
Mr.
Panamá
President,
expresa su gratitud
Panama would
a la
like to
presidencia de
express
este
our
Consejo
thanks
por
to the
convocar esta
presidency of
reunión.
this council for convening this meeting.
Saludamos y agradecemos la
We welcome
participación del primer
and are
ministro de
grateful for
Grecia,
the participation of the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos
del ministro de
Mitsotakis,
Relaciones
the Minister of
Exteriores,
Foreign
George
Affairs of Greece,
Gerapetritis,
George
así como de los
Gerapetritis, as well
representantes de las demás
as the
delegaciones que nos
representatives
honran
of
con
other
su presencia.
delegations honoring us today with their
Extendemos
presence.
nuestro saludo y
We extend
agradecimiento
our
a su excelencia António
greeting and
Guterres,
thanks also to
Secretario
His
General
Excellency
de
António
las Naciones
Guterres,
Unidas.
Secretary-General of the United
Reconocemos
Nations.
también
We also
la
recognize the
participación de la señora
participation
Melina
of Madame
Travlos,
Melina Travlos,
presidenta de la Junta Directiva de la Unión de
President
Armadores
Union of
Griegos,
Greek Ship
por su
Owners,
valiosa
and
intervención,
thank you for your
y
valuable
Christian Bürger,
briefing, and Mr.
profesor
Christian
de
Bürger,
Relaciones Internacionales
professor
de la
at
Universidad
the
de
University of
Copenhague
Copenhagen
investigador
and
en el
research
Instituto de
fellow
las
at the
Naciones
United
Unidas para
Nations
la
Institute for
Investigación sobre el
Disarmament
Desarme,
Research,
UNIDIR,
UNIDIR.
a quienes agradecemos sus valiosas
We
presentaciones.
thank you for your valuable briefings.
La seguridad marítima internacional enfrenta
International maritime
amenazas y
security is
desafíos cada
facing
vez más
threats and
complejos.
challenges that are ever more
De acuerdo con el
complex.
derecho internacional
In accordance
público,
with public
la seguridad
international
marítima
law,
debe estar
maritime
basada
security
en
must be
principios
based on
fundamentales
fundamental
que buscan
principles which
proteger la
aim to
libertad de
protect the
navegación,
freedom of
la vida
navigation,
humana en el mar,
human life
la
at sea,
protección del medio
the
marino
protection of the
y la
marine
prevención
environment,
de la
and the
contaminación,
prevention
así como
of
medios para el
pollution,
desarrollo
as well as the means
armónico
for
de
the
todas las naciones.
harmonious development of all
La
nations.
costumbre y diversos
Custom and
instrumentos de
various
derecho
instruments of international
internacional,
law,
en especial la
in
Convención de
particular
las
the
Naciones
United
Unidas
Nations
sobre el derecho del
Convention on the
mar,
Law of the Sea,
consagran principios y
enshrine
normas
essential
esenciales como la
principles and
jurisdicción de los
norms
estados sobre los mares,
such as the
de la
jurisdiction of
seguridad
states over
marítima,
the seas,
así como las
maritime
normas
security, as
fundamentales
well
que
as the
consagran la
fundamental
libertad de
norms
navegación
ensuring freedom
y
of
el derecho
navigation
a la
and the
navegación.
right to navigation.
La navegación
Maritime
marítima,
navigation,
pilar fundamental de la
fundamental
globalización,
pillar of
ha sido un motor
globalization, has
clave
been a
para el
key
desarrollo de
engine
las
for the
naciones,
development of
al
nations
facilitar el
by
comercio a
facilitating
través de una
trade
extensa
through an
red
extensive
de rutas comerciales
network of
interconectadas.
interconnected trade
Actualmente,
routes.
el transporte
Currently,
marítimo
international maritime
internacional
transport
moviliza cerca de 80%
moves
de
around
las mercancías
80%
a
of
nivel
goods
mundial.
globally.
En un contexto
In a
geopolítico cada vez más
geopolitical
complejo,
context that is ever more
esta vasta
complex,
interconexión
this
global
vast
enfrenta
global
crecientes
interconnection is
desafíos
facing
que ponen
increasing
en riesgo
challenges
su
that
seguridad y estabilidad.
endanger security and
Sin
stability.
embargo, existen amenazas a
Nevertheless,
estos principios,
there are
tales
threats to
como
these
disputas
principles, such as
fronterizas,
border
competencia por
disputes,
recursos naturales,
competition for natural
piratería,
resources,
ataques
piracy,
terroristas
terrorist
y el
attacks,
crimen
and
transnacional
transnational
organizado.
organized crime.
A estos riesgos
To
se suma
these
la preocupante
risks, we have
erosión del
to add
respeto al
the
derecho
worrying
internacional,
erosion of respect
especialmente
for
al derecho
international
del mar,
law, particularly the
lo que
law of the
debilita los
sea,
marcos
which
jurídicos
weakens
vigentes y
current legal
obstaculiza los
frameworks
esfuerzos
and
para
hinders
garantizar
efforts
una
to
gobernanza
guarantee
marítima
peaceful
pacífica
maritime
y
governance
basada en la
based
cooperación
on
internacional.
international cooperation.
El incremento de
The
ataques
increase
contra
in the
naves y
attacks
buques
against
comerciales
vessels
en las
and
principales rutas
commercial
marítimas
shipping
del mundo,
along the main
esenciales
shipping
para el
lines in the
comercio
world,
global,
which are
representan no
essential for
solo
global
una
trade,
amenaza directa para vidas
is
humanas
not only a
inocentes,
direct
sino
threat
también
to innocent
un grave
human life,
perjuicio para la
but also a
industria
serious
naviera
threat
y
to
en
the shipping
consecuencia para la
industry
economía
and
global.
therefore for the global economy.
Durante el año
During
2024, la
2024,
industria
the
naviera
international
internacional
shipping industry
enfrentó uno de los
faced
periodos
one of
más
the
críticos
most
de su historia
critical
reciente.
periods in its
La
recent history.
intensificación de los
The
ataques
intensification
perpetrados por
of
los
attacks
hutíes
carried
en el
out by
Mar
the
Rojo
Houthis in
provocó
the
una
Red
grave
Sea
disrupción
led to
en la
a serious
navegación
disruption in
internacional,
commercial shipping,
afectando de
affecting
manera significativa
significantly
las cadenas globales de
global supply
suministro y
chains
comprometiendo la seguridad
and
marítima en una de las
compromising
rutas
maritime
más
security
estratégicas del
along
comercio
one of the
internacional.
most commercial,
Como consecuencia de
strategic
esta alarmante
international shipping
situación,
routes. As a
más de un
consequence of
centenar
this
de
situation,
embarcaciones
more
de
than
distintas
100
banderas
ships
fueron
of
atacados
flying
mediante
various
drones,
flags were
artefactos
attacked with
explosivos,
drones, explosive
abordajes y
artifacts,
otros
boardings,
métodos,
and other methods,
incluyendo actos de
including
extrema gravedad como el secuestro de la tripulación del
serious
buque
acts such as the
MV Galaxy
kidnapping
Leader,
of the
retenida
MV Galaxy
ilegalmente por los
Leader,
hutíes por
illegally
más de un año.
retained now by the Houthis for more
Este
than a year.
lamentable episodio debe
This
servir como un
lamentable
llamado de
episode
atención a la
should
comunidad
serve as a wake-up
internacional
call to the international
sobre la
community with
urgente
regard to the
necesidad
urgent
de poner
need
fin a las
to put an
detenciones
end to
arbitrarias
arbitrary
y los actos de
detentions and
secuestro,
acts of kidnapping,
prácticas que no solo violan el
practices which
derecho
not only
internacional,
violate international
sino que
law,
también
but
ponen en
which
riesgo la
also
seguridad y
endanger
estabilidad del
security
comercio
and the
marítimo global.
stability of global maritime
La gravedad
trade.
de la situación ha
The
obligado a
seriousness of the
numerosos armadores
situation has
a
led
desviar
numerous
sus
ship owners to
embarcaciones
divert
para
their
evitar
vessels
zonas de
in
alto
order to
riesgo,
avoid high-risk
optando
areas,
por rutas
opting for
alternativas más
alternative, more
seguras.
secure routes.
Esta medida ha
This
generado
measure has
un
led
aumento
to a
considerable en los tiempos
considerable
de tránsito,
increase in
las
transit
emisiones
times,
contaminantes y los costos operativos.
polluting emissions and
En
operational
particular,
costs.
al verse
In
obligadas a
particular,
desviar sus
being
rutas
forced to
alrededor del Cabo de
divert
Buena
around the
Esperanza,
Cape of Good Hope
las empresas navieras han
has meant that
incrementado las
shipping
emisiones
companies
de sus
have
naves
increased
en un
their
70%,
emissions by
agravando aún más la huella de
70%,
carbono en
further
un momento
worsening the
crítico de
carbon
lucha contra el
footprint
cambio climático.
at a critical time in the fight
Esta
against
situación
climate
afecta
change.
directamente
This
la
situation
preservación del
directly
ambiente
affects
marino,
the
a
preservation
pesar
of
de
the
que el
marine
transporte
environment,
marítimo sigue
despite the
siendo, en
fact that
términos
maritime
relativos,
transport in relative
uno de los
terms
métodos de
continues to
transporte
be one of
más
the methods
respetuosos
of
con el medio
transport that
ambiente.
most respects the environment.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
en reconocimiento de la
recognition of the
importancia del
importance
servicio que
of
brinda
the
nuestra
service
cintura
provided
geográfica al
by
transporte
our
marítimo
geographic
global,
position to
a la
global
libertad de
maritime shipping,
navegación
to freedom of
y de la
navigation
seguridad
and maritime
marítima como derechos
security as
universales,
universal
la
laws,
República de
the
Panamá,
Republic of
como
Panama,
soberano
as a
territorial
country
y
with
administrador del
territorial
Canal
and
de Panamá,
administrative sovereignty
declaró
over the Panama
solemnemente
Canal,
que el canal,
solemnly
en
declared
cuanto
that the
vía
canal,
acuática del
in
tránsito
terms of
internacional,
an
será
international
permanentemente
transit waterway,
neutral
would be
para
permanently
que
neutral,
tanto en tiempo
so
de paz
that in
como de
times
guerra,
of both peace
el
and
canal
war, the
permanezca
canal
seguro
would
y
be
abierto para el
secure
tránsito
and
pacífico de
open
todas
to
las
the
naves del
peaceful
mundo, en
transit
condiciones de entera igualdad
of shipping
y
throughout
sin
the world
discriminación de
on
ninguna
equal
índole.
conditions without any
Durante los
discrimination of
últimos
any
25
kind.
años,
Over the last 25
Panamá,
years,
con plena
Panama, in
soberanía,
full sovereignty,
asumió tanto la
has
administración
assumed
eficiente
both
y
the efficient
pacífica del Canal
and
de
peaceful
Panamá
administration of
como
the
su
Panama
total
Canal, as well
modernización
as
y
its
ampliación
complete
para
modernization and
convertirla
expansion,
en una de las
converting
rutas
it into one
interoceánicas
of the
más competitivas y
inter-ocean
seguras
routes
para el
that is the
comercio
most
marítimo
competitive and
mundial.
secure for international global shipping.
Nuestro firme compromiso con el
Our firm
desarrollo de la
commitment to
navegación
the
marítima
development of
y la
maritime shipping
protección
and
de
the
las rutas
protection of
comerciales está
trade
fielmente
routes
reflejada
is
en nuestra
fully,
firme
faithfully
convicción de que la
reflected in our firm
ampliación
conviction
y
that
la
the expansion
modernización
and
del Canal de
modernization
Panamá,
of the Panama
una obra
Canal,
financiada
work which
íntegramente
was
por la
fully
República de
financed
Panamá
by
e
the Republic
inaugurada
of Panama
en el
and
año
inaugurated
2016,
in 2016,
continúe sirviendo
continues
con
to
eficacia al
serve
transporte
effectively
marítimo global,
global
permitiendo
shipping,
el paso seguro
making it
e
possible
ininterrumpido de
to
buques
have
post-Panamax
vessels pass
y
post-Panamax
neo-Panamax
and Neo
uniendo
Panamax,
a 188
bringing together
rutas marítimas a nivel
188
global,
global
aumentando la
routes,
capacidad operativa del
increasing the
canal,
operative capacity of the
impulsando el
canal,
crecimiento y
promoting
desarrollo del
and
comercio
developing
internacional.
international trade.
La frase de Panamá es:
pro mundi beneficio,
Pro mundi
en beneficio del
beneficio,
mundo.
in benefit
Y
of
así
the, for the benefit
consideramos
of the world.
que se
That's
destina el canal.
Panama's motto. That's what the
Como
canal is all
nación con una
about for
estrecha
us.
relación con el
As a
mar,
nation with a close
hemos
relationship
sido
to the sea,
testigos
we
de
have
los
been
efectos que los
witnesses of
factores
the effects
ambientales
that
pueden ejercer
environmental
sobre la
factors
seguridad
can
de nuestras
have
rutas
on the
marítimas
security
y
of
sobre el
our
funcionamiento
maritime
del canal de
routes
Panamá.
and the functioning of the
En
Panama
particular,
Canal. In
una
particular,
severa sequía,
a
más allá de
severe
los
drought
eventos
over
que
and above the
históricamente
events which
experimenta,
historically we have
administra, que ha
experienced
enfrentado
in our
y gestionado
administration,
el canal de Panamá,
the administration of the
provocó la
Panama Canal.
disminución de los
This
niveles
drought
de
led
agua,
to a
lo que nos
reduction in
obligó a
water
implementar
levels that
medidas
forced us to implement
adicionales
additional
para garantizar
measures
el
to guarantee
funcionamiento adecuado
the
del canal
adequate
de Panamá.
functioning of the Panama Canal.
Esta
This
situación ha puesto en
situation
mayor relieve
has
la
stressed
vulnerabilidad de las rutas
to an
marítimas
even
ante los
greater
desafíos del cambio
extent the
climático.
vulnerability of
La
shipping
autoridad del
lanes
canal de
to
Panamá
the
ha estudiado
challenges of
diversas
climate
opciones
change.
para
The
la
Panama
administración,
Canal
mantenimiento,
Authority studied
uso
various
y
options for the
conservación
administration,
de los
maintenance and
recursos hídricos de la
preservation
cuenca
of the water
hidrográfica
resources
con el
of
objetivo de
the
abordar
water
esta
basin
problemática.
in order to address this problem.
Además, está
Additionally,
adelantando planes
we
para
are putting
asegurar
forward plans
fuentes de
to
agua
ensure
suficientes
sufficient
que
sources of
abastezcan el
water that
suministro
will
tanto de la población
provide
del
water
país
both for the
como el
population of the country
funcionamiento
as well as
continuo
to
y
ensure the
eficiente de
ongoing and
nuestro
efficient
canal.
functioning of our canal.
Panamá, con
Panama,
una sólida
with
tradición
a solid
marítima, y con
maritime
más de
tradition and with more than
8.800 buques bajo nuestro
8,800
registro,
vessels flying
lo que
our flag,
representa un 15%
representing
de la flota internacional,
15% of the
equivalente a
international
más de
fleet, equivalent to more than
249 millones de
249
toneladas de
gross
registro bruto,
registered
ha
tons, has
fortalecido el proceso de
strengthened
análisis
our
previo al
process
abanderamiento.
for analyzing
Este
vessels
proceso
before
ahora
registration.
incorpora,
This
además de
process now
criterios
includes, in
técnicos
addition to
relacionados con la
technical
nave,
aspects related to the ship,
información detallada sobre el
detailed
historial de los
information on the
propietarios
history
y
of the
operadores.
owners and the operators of that ship.
Panamá, a través de su
Panama, through
autoridad
its
marítima,
maritime
la
authority, the
ha redoblado
AMP,
sus
has
esfuerzos para
redoubled its
depurar
efforts
su
to
flota
review our
mercante mediante una
merchant
política
fleet
de cero
through a policy
tolerancia
of zero
frente al uso
tolerance
indebido de su
with
bandera,
regard to the
con el
undue
objetivo de
use of
proteger
our flag,
la
with the
reputación
aim
de
of
un registro
protecting
con
the
más de un
reputation
siglo
of
de
a
trayectoria de
register
servicio
that
a la
has more
comunidad
than
internacional.
a century of history
Como
serving
miembro
the
fundador
international
del Registry's
community.
Information
As a founding
Sharing
member of the
Compact,
Register's
RISC,
Information Sharing
una base de
Compact,
datos
RISC,
compartida entre
which is
registros
a
marítimos,
database, a shared
nuestro país
database
busca
between
limitar el cambio
maritime
estratégico de
registers,
bandera por
we
parte de
aim
buques
to limit the
involucrados
strategic
en
use
actividades
of our flag
sancionables.
in activities
Se han reforzado los mecanismos legales
our
para
flag by
sancionar la
vessels
pesca
involved
ilegal,
in sanctionable
no declarada,
activities.
no reglamentada.
We have increased
Adoptar medidas contra el
measures with
financiamiento del
regard to
terrorismo
illegal,
y
undeclared
cancelar
and
el registro de
unregulated
naves
fishing.
infractoras o vinculadas a
And,
actividades ilícitas y en este último
We have
caso,
adopted measures
mediante el
against the
decreto
funding of
ejecutivo número
terrorism and
512 del
cancelled the
2024
registration of
y la
vessels
resolución que lo reglamenta.
breaking these rules. This was covered
Con
by
estas
Executive
medidas,
Decree 512 of
Panamá reafirma su
2024.
compromiso
With these measures,
con una
Panama
administración
reaffirms its commitment to a
transparente y responsable
transparent
del
and
registro de
responsible
buques en
administration
plena
of shipping
consonancia
registries
con las normas
in
y convenios
full harmony
internacionales.
with international
No obstante,
norms and
seguimos atentos a los
conventions.
importantes
However,
desafíos
we
en
continue
diversos
to pay
ámbitos
attention to
que demandan
various challenges
atención
that
y
require
cooperación internacional.
attention and international
Entre estos
cooperation.
se
Amongst
encuentran los
these
ataques a
are the
embarcaciones
attacks
y
on
sus
vessels
tripulaciones,
and their crew,
los ciberataques
cyber attacks
contra los
against
sistemas de
navigation
navegación y
systems
operación,
and operational
el abandono
systems,
de buques
the
con
abandonment
marinos a
of
bordo sin
vessels
salario ni
with sailors
asistencia,
on board
así
without
como los
salary or
arrestos
assistance,
arbitrarios de
as well
naves
as
y
arbitrary
tripulantes por
arrests
presuntas
of
cargas
ships
ilícitas.
and crews due to presumed illicit
Nos preocupa
cargo.
especialmente
We are
la práctica
particularly
de
concerned at the
detenciones
practice of
arbitrarias en
arbitrary
ciertos puertos,
detentions at certain ports,
acompañadas de
accompanied
sanciones
by
desproporcionadas
disproportionate
que en
sanctions,
muchos
which
casos
in
se
many
asemejan
cases
más a prácticas
are
extorsivas
more similar
que a
to
procedimientos
extortion
legítimos.
practices than
En
legal
este
proceedings.
contexto,
In this
destacamos
context,
que a
we would
través de la
highlight
Autoridad
that through
Marítima de
the
Panamá,
Panama
nuestro
Maritime
país
Authority, our
participa
country
activamente
participates
como miembro de
actively
la
as a
red
member of the
anticorrupción
Maritime
marítima,
Anti-Corruption
una red
Network. This
internacional
is an
comprometida con la
international
erradicación
network
de la
committed to
corrupción
the
del
eradication
sector.
of corruption in the maritime
Esta
sector.
afiliación
This membership
no
not
solo
only
refleja
reflects
nuestro
our
compromiso con los
commitment
más
to
altos
the
estándares
highest standards of
de integridad,
integrity,
sino que
but
también
also
nos brinda la
provides the
oportunidad de
opportunity
colaborar
to work
estrechamente
closely
con actores
with key
clave para
actors in
implementar
order to
prácticas
implement
éticas
ethical
que
practices
refuercen la
that
gobernanza
reinforce
de los
governance
puertos
of
y rutas
ports and
comerciales.
shipping routes.
Panamá continúa
Panama
fortaleciendo
continues to
alianzas estratégicas
strengthen its
con los Estados
strategic
miembros de la
alliances
Organización
with member
Marítima
states of the
Internacional,
IMO,
y otros actores
International
globales en
Maritime
la industria
Organization,
marítima,
and other global
participando
industrial
activamente
maritime agreements,
en iniciativas
participating
claves
actively in
que
key
buscan
initiatives that aim
contrarrestar
to
la piratería y el
counteract
robo a mano
piracy
armada en el
and
mar.
armed robbery at sea.
Asimismo, desempeña un
Also,
rol
we
destacado en el
play
desarrollo de estándares
an important
globales
role in the development
orientados
of
a
global
fortalecer
standards aimed at
la
strengthening
seguridad y protección de los
security
buques.
and the protection of
La
vessels.
coyuntura actual en
In
el
the
Consejo de
current
Seguridad de las Naciones Unidas,
situation in
donde
the
convergen
UN Security
crecientes
Council, we
preocupaciones
see
por la seguridad
increasing
marítima global,
convergence of concerns with
ofrece un
regard to
espacio
global
propicio y
maritime security.
necesario
This
para
provides
reflexionar
an
sobre la
adequate and
importancia de
necessary
proteger las rutas
forum
marítimas
to
estratégicas.
reflect on how we
Señor
can
Presidente,
protect strategic
Panamá,
maritime routes.
cuya identidad nacional, al
President,
igual que
Panama,
Grecia,
whose,
está
like Greece,
intrínsecamente
national
ligada
identity
a
is
su condición de
intrinsically
país
linked with our
interoceánico, y en este
condition
caso
of being
administrador
between
soberano del
two
canal de
oceans,
Panamá,
and as a sovereign
comprende
administrator
con
of the
claridad
Panama
el
Canal,
valor
clearly
geopolítico y
understands the
económico de
geopolitical
garantizar
and
la navegación
economic
segura,
importance of
proteger
guaranteeing
los
secure
corredores
navigation,
marítimos y
protecting
asegurar la
shipping
estabilidad
lanes,
del
and
comercio
ensuring
mundial.
the stability
Desde
of
esta
global
perspectiva,
trade.
reafirmamos nuestro
In this regard,
compromiso
we reaffirm
con la
our
cooperación
commitment to international
internacional y la
cooperation
promoción de una
and the
gobernanza
promotion
marítima segura,
of secure,
transparente y
transparent
apegada al derecho
maritime
internacional.
governance in adherence with international
Estamos
law.
convencidos
We are
de
convinced
que solo
that
a
it is
través del
only
diálogo
through
y la
dialogue
cooperación
and
internacional
international cooperation
podremos
that
salvaguardar
we
la
will be
paz
able to
y la
safeguard
prosperidad
peace
de nuestras
and
naciones.
prosperity of our
Muchas gracias.
nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. And I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Nicolai Ruge, Special Envoy for Maritime Security of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the Secretary-General, Ms. Travelers, and Professor Bücker for their contributions. I would also like to express my gratitude to Greece for organizing today's important meeting and to Prime Minister Mitsotakis for leading today's debate. The oceans and seas serve as a vital link between the continents and our nations. Maritime security is a cornerstone of the modern interconnected world and of multilateralism itself. Mr. President, let me make 4 points. Firstly, let me stress that Denmark reaffirms the centrality and universality of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We call on all states to respect UNCLOS as the legal framework within which all activities in the ocean and seas must be carried out. Maritime territorial conflicts must be resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law, including UNCLOS. Freedom of navigation is central to international trade and economic development. With one of the world's largest commercial fleets, Denmark is committed to keeping sea lanes open and ensuring that safety of all seafarers is absolutely paramount. Denmark has a long maritime history, and our focus far transcends our immediate neighborhood. In recent years, we have responded to complex maritime security challenges in the Gulf of Guinea, in the Red Sea, off the Horn of Africa, and in the Straits of Hormuz. We have done this through multinational and coordinated efforts in response to piracy and other attacks on civilian commercial vessels to ensure freedom of navigation and global maritime security. This reflects Denmark's steadfast commitment to supporting our principled approach to international law and maritime security through tangible and meaningful contributions. We urge all countries to shoulder their responsibility to this end. Secondly, Mr. President, we need to look at maritime security in a holistic way. Challenges are often linked to onshore instability in coastal states, including poverty, law enforcement challenges, and climate change. The UN is the best framework to address these issues in a comprehensive way. For example, the Council's debates on international piracy since 2008 contributed to various processes, including security, judicial, law enforcement, and outreach to civil society. Together, these processes contributed to a sharp reduction in attacks on commercial shipping in the Western Indian Ocean and in the Gulf of Guinea. Piracy and other attacks on commercial vessels undermine the resilience of interconnected trade networks and threaten global food and energy security. Organized crime groups operating at sea, including drugs and weapons trafficking, people smuggling, sanctions evasion, and illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, further weaken often already fragile states. These activities can deprive coastal states of the resources and revenue they need for economic development and prosperity. Denmark is working with several developing countries in building national and regional ownership and capacity. This includes assisting with maritime domain awareness, improving coordination, and ensuring the sustainable use of their maritime resources. Third, Mr. President, we must address new and complex threats in the maritime domain. Protecting critical maritime infrastructure is vital for the functioning of our interconnected societies. Attacks on such infrastructure are deplorable and must be prevented. Coastal states' capacities to monitor and respond to maritime threats above and below the surface need to be enhanced. The increasing reliance on substandard vessels to evade sanctions, including UN sanctions, pose a great risk to the environment, seafarers, maritime safety, and security. These vessels are often old, poorly maintained, insufficiently insured, and sail with their transponders off. This is a challenge not only in the North Sea and Baltic Sea, but also the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, in the Mediterranean Sea, and elsewhere. If we do not act and ensure effective enforcement, it will only be a matter of time before an oil spill destroys a coastline somewhere. Finally, Mr. President, Denmark hopes that today's high-level open debate will start a discussion on strengthening our collective response to the maritime threats to peace and security, economic prosperity, law and order, and sustainable development. Denmark firmly supports a strengthened role for the United Nations in tackling critical maritime security challenges. We believe that enhancing cooperation on information sharing, capacity building, and exchanging best practices would be in our collective interest. Together, we can ensure a safer, more secure maritime domain for all, fostering stability and prosperity across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huger, for your statement. And I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking Greece for its capable leadership of the Security Council this month and for convening this timely debate on maritime security, an issue of paramount importance to the maintenance of international peace and security. Your personal participation, Mr. Prime Minister, underscores your country's commitment to this domain. With a strong history of seafaring and a substantial modern merchant fleet, Greece plays an important role in global maritime affairs. I would like to thank Secretary-General Guterres for his insightful and thoughtful remarks. We also appreciate the briefings by Madam Travlos and Professor Brugger. Mr. President, as a coastal state strategically located in the northern Arabian Sea at the confluence of critical international sea lanes, Pakistan attaches the highest importance to a safe and secure maritime domain that is governed by international law. Our national security, economic resilience, regional connectivity, and food and energy security are inextricably linked to the sustainability and openness of our seas. Contemporary maritime threats are multifaceted and transnational, ranging from piracy, terrorism, and trafficking of arms and narcotics to cyber vulnerabilities in port infrastructure, marine pollution, and the escalating climate-induced risks to coastal zones. Confronting these challenges necessitates collective and coordinated action firmly anchored in international law. The international legal regime governing maritime activities comprises a broad array of global, regional, and bilateral instruments, as well as customary international law. Since its adoption, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and its affiliated institutions have served as the cornerstone of the international maritime legal order, also promoting harmonious, equitable, and judicious use of ocean resources for all mankind. Mr. President, our oceans must be preserved as arenas for cooperation and shared prosperity, not as theaters of strategic rivalry. In our own immediate neighborhood, however, we have witnessed a troubling pattern of behavior by one major country driven by aspirations of unchecked regional hegemony, marked by aggressive naval expansion and efforts seeking to assert dominance over critical waterways. This destabilizing and dangerous naval buildup is accompanied by coercive diplomacy and the systematic exclusion of neighboring states from regional maritime security frameworks, including the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Such actions undermine the maritime balance and restrict the space for inclusive cooperation. This same country has also displayed a concerning propensity to usurp and weaponize shared natural resources, including transboundary rivers, in flagrant breach of treaty obligations and the principles of good neighborliness. These actions reflect a broader agenda of leveraging geography to disrupt and destabilize long-standing cooperative arrangements, particularly to the detriment of lower riparian state, that is Pakistan, and to impose unilateral outcomes in both riverine and maritime spheres. Mr. President, as a maritime nation, Pakistan views the Arabian Sea as its fifth neighbor, integral to its economic vision and strategic orientation. Pakistan's unique geographical positioning offers significant potential to serve as a regional transshipment hub, enabling trade and connectivity for landlocked Central Asian countries. Pakistan firmly believes that our oceans must remain zones of peace, stability, and inclusive development. We categorically reject any attempt in our region to dominate maritime spaces, undermine established legal frameworks, or marginalize the legitimate interests of other coastal states under any guise or pretext. Despite emerging challenges, Pakistan has remained a committed and responsible partner in international efforts to strengthen maritime security. Our Navy continues to contribute to combined maritime forces, task forces 150 and 151, conducting operations across the Gulf of Oman, Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea to counter terrorism, smuggling, and piracy. We have also launched our own regional maritime security patrols to ensure a safe and secure environment in the seas. Our dedication to regional cooperation is also reflected in our engagement with multilateral initiatives such as the Djibouti Code of Conduct. At the national level, we continue to build capacity in port security, blue economy development, maritime domain awareness, and marine conservation. Pakistan unequivocally condemns attacks on commercial shipping and maritime vessels in the Red Sea, which threaten global trade, destabilize region, and jeopardize global maritime security. We note the Secretary-General's most recent report under Resolution 2722, confirming no recent Houthi attacks on merchant vessels in the Red Sea. Pakistan also recognizes the urgent need to address the growing climate-related risks facing our maritime and coastal systems. Rising sea levels, acidification, and coastal erosion pose serious threats to livelihoods, ecosystems, biodiversity, and maritime stability. Any holistic maritime security strategy must incorporate the climate-ocean nexus and ensure equitable access to maritime resources. Mr. President, maritime security is inseparable from the broader cause of international peace and stability. We must collectively reject any attempts to instrumentalize maritime spaces for political or strategic leverage. Instead, we must reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism, equity, and cooperation as the foundation for a secure and sustainable maritime future. Pakistan stands ready to work with all countries to protect the integrity of the maritime domain, uphold international law, and ensure that our oceans remain open, peaceful, and beneficial for all humankind. I thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic, I warmly welcome you to the Security Council. I thank the Secretary-General, His Excellency Mr. António Guterres, for his comprehensive and insightful briefing. I also acknowledge the valuable contributions of Madam Travlos, President of the Union of Greek Ship Owners and Chair of the Neptune Group of Companies, and Professor Berger of the University of Copenhagen and the UNIDIR. Sierra Leone welcomes this timely and urgent debate on maritime security, an issue of increasing global concern and a persistent threat to international peace and security. From coastal to landlocked nations, all member states are affected by the far-reaching consequences of maritime insecurity, which disrupts international navigation, trade, and supply chains. A coherent and forward-looking response by the Council is therefore imperative. With over 80% of global trade by volume and over 70% by value transported by sea, representing nearly 14 trillion annually, maritime supply chains remain the backbone of the global economy. Therefore, shifting geopolitical realities, technological transformation, and the intensifying impacts of climate change are exposing new and complex vulnerabilities in the maritime domain. In this context, Mr. President, Sierra Leone wishes to highlight 4 critical and interconnected dimensions that demand a holistic and cooperative response. First, maritime security threats are transnational and multifaceted, requiring cooperative responses beyond the capacities of individual states. From piracy and terrorism to transnational organized crime, maritime threats involve a broad array of actors, including armed groups, terrorist organizations, and criminal syndicates that operate within and beyond national waters. Modern-day piracy alone is estimated to cost the global economy $25 billion annually, threatening shipping routes, endangering civilian lives, and sowing instability in coastal communities. Critical areas such as the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Guinea, and the waters off the coast of Venezuela remain particularly at risk. Transboundary blue crimes such as illicit trafficking, including arms, narcotics, and persons, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and marine population also demand collective and sustained responses. On the African continent, the African Union has taken important steps to strengthen maritime governance and safeguard Africa's blue economy. The 2016 Lomé Charter on Maritime Security and Safety and Development has provided a regional framework for countering maritime crime, promoting cooperation among coastal states, and encouraging the ratification of relevant international instruments. In West Africa, collaborative efforts among states, civil society, institutions, and UN agencies such as the FAO have led to strengthened regulation on transshipment, a major driver of IIU fishing. These measures help protect livelihoods in coastal communities across the countries such as Ghana, Liberia, Mauritania, Senegal, and my country, Sierra Leone. To address emerging threats, Sierra Leone underscores the need to reinforce cooperation under regional frameworks like the Djibouti Code of Conduct and the Yaoundé Architecture, which must be supported through clear mandates, sustainable financing, and inclusive participation by littoral states. The leadership of the International Maritime Organization, IMO, remains in vital setting technical and normative standards. Climate change, more than any other factor, has heightened maritime insecurity through rising sea levels, intensified water events, and increased natural disasters, all of which disrupt maritime operations and exacerbate poverty and instability. These challenges demand integrated, anticipatory responses rooted in risk management, risk mitigation, and resilience building. Second, geopolitical rivalries are compounding maritime insecurity, especially in contested or resource-rich waters. Heightened military presence, competing territorial claims, and disputes over maritime rights and boundaries risk escalating tensions. The assertion of maritime claims without regard for international law may aggravate conflict and compromise navigational safety. In such situations, diplomacy, de-escalation, and adherence to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas are essential to uphold peace and stability. Third, effective responses to maritime threats require alignment and coordination across global, regional, and national levels. While UNCLOS and Security Council resolutions 1816 of 2018, 1838 of 2018, 2015 of 2011, and 2380 of 2017 provide important guidance, they must be coherently implemented alongside regional instruments, national legislation, and operational strategies. Greater interagency coordination and information sharing are needed to avoid duplication and close existing operational gaps. Aligning national maritime strategies with global security and development frameworks, including the role of regional economic communities and regional mechanisms, is essential. Sierra Leone calls for enhanced cooperation, including technology transfer, technical assistance, and capacity building through partnerships with the IMO, FAO, UNEP, UNODC, and others. As a concrete example, access to the European Frontex information sharing system could support the development of similar regional platforms. Leveraging innovation and technology is also key. Tools such as satellite-based monitoring, AI-driven vessel tracking, blockchain secured trade documentation, and unmanned systems are revolutionizing maritime domain awareness. However, such technologies must be governed by robust regulatory frameworks, transparency, and data protection protocols. Public-private partnerships will be critical, particularly in supporting developing countries' access and implementation. Fourth, national authorities must strengthen judicial and law enforcement capacities to tackle the nexus between maritime crime, terrorism, and trafficking. This includes establishment of joint maritime task forces, enhanced prosecutorial cooperation, and development of legal frameworks for maritime crime adjudication. Capacity building must also focus on coastal surveillance among maritime forces and human capital development. Education, training, and infrastructure upgrades are vital to sustain long-term resilience. Mr. President, in concluding, Sierra Leone reiterates its support for the Secretary-General's new agenda for peace, which advocates an integrated approach to peace and security, including maritime security, within the broader development framework. We also align ourselves with the commitment in the Pact for the Future, which calls for more effective global governance to address interconnected maritime challenges from sustainable development to trade to climate resilience and transnational crime. The seas are our shared lifeline. Therefore, safety and stability remain our collective responsibility. As we navigate these challenges together, let us reinforce international cooperation and that oppose peace, development, environmental stewardship, and the rule of law. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
سيد الرئيس، أود في مستهل مداخلتي أن أعبر باسم وفد الجزائر عن خالص الشكر والتقدير للرئاسة اليونانية على تنظيم هذا النقاش الرفيع المستوى حول موضوع بالغ الأهمية يشكل اليوم محوراً أساسياً من محاور الأمن الجماعي. حيث
pillar
يمثل
of
هذا الاجتماع
collective security
فرصة
today.
لتبادل الرؤى
Indeed,
حول
this
أنجع
meeting
السبل
is an
لمواجهة
opportunity for us to
التهديدات
exchange
الناشئة
views regarding the most
والمتزايدة
effective
للأمن البحري.
ways of addressing
كما نود أن
emerging
نشكر السيد
and
الأمين
mounting
العام
threats to
للأمم
maritime
المتحدة
security. We
أنطونيو
would like to
غوتيريش
thank
على الإحاطة
Mr. António
الشاملة
Guterres,
التي تفضل
Secretary-General of the
بتقديمها.
United Nations,
كما
for
استمعنا
his very
كذلك
substantive
باهتمام
presentation.
لإحاطتي
We
السيدة
listened very
ميلينا
carefully
طرابلوس
to the
رئيسة
briefing
مجلس إدارة
given by Ms.
اتحاد
Melina
ملاك
Travlos,
السفن اليونانيين
President of
والسيد
the Union of
كريستيان
Greek
بوغر
Ship Owners,
أستاذ العلاقات
as well
الدولية
as to the
في
briefing
جامعة
by Mr.
كوبنهاغن
Christian Bugger,
وزميل الأبحاث في
Professor
معهد
at
الأمم
the University
المتحدة
of
لبحوث نزع
Copenhagen and
السلاح.
Research Fellow at the
وفي إطار
United Nations
نقاشنا اليوم
Institute for Disarmament
تود
Research,
الجزائر أن
UNIDIR.
تؤكد على النقاط
As
التالية.
part of this debate,
أولاً
Algeria would like to
ترى
make the
الجزائر
following
أن
remarks.
مواجهة
First,
التحديات التي
in
تهدد
order
الأمن
to
البحري
tackle the
بما
challenges
فيها القرصنة
imperiling maritime
والسطو
security,
المسلح ضد
including
السفن
piracy,
والجريمة
armed
المنظمة
robbery,
والصيد
organized
غير
crime,
القانوني ومكافحة الإرهاب والهجرة
illegal
غير
fishing,
الشرعية
terrorism,
تتطلب مقاربة شاملة تبنى على
illegal
تعزيز
migration.
التعاون
As
الدولي
well, we need a
وتبادل
global approach
المعلومات
based
وبناء
on
القدرات
strengthened
مع
international
احترام
cooperation,
المبادئ
exchange of
الأساسية
information,
للقانون
strengthened
الدولي
capacity, and
والالتزام
all
الفعلي
this with due
بالصكوك
respect for the principles of
القانونية
international law
الدولية ذات
and
الصلة
the obligations
بالأمن
stemming
البحري
from
وفي
international
طليعتها
instruments related
اتفاقية
to
الأمم
maritime
المتحدة
security,
لقانون
specifically
البحار
the United
لعام
Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea,
1982.
1982.
هذه الاتفاقية التي تعد الإطار
This convention,
القانوني
UNCLOS,
الشامل الذي
is a
يجب أن
global
تمارس
legal framework
في ظله جميع الأنشطة
within which
البحرية.
all maritime
وقد تم
activities must be
بناء
conducted.
على هذه الاتفاقية
On the basis of this
اعتماد العديد
convention,
من الصكوك
many other
الدولية
international
من قبل
instruments
المنظمة البحرية
were
الدولية
adopted
بهدف
by
التصدي
the International Maritime
للمخاطر
Organization
والتحديات
with a
المتزايدة
view to
التي تهدد أمن الملاحة
addressing dangers
البحرية.
and growing threats
ثانياً،
to navigation.
تؤكد
Second,
الجزائر على أهمية تسوية النزاعات
Algeria would like to
البحرية
reiterate the
بالوسائل
importance
السلمية
of resolving
وتلاحظ
maritime disputes
الدور
through
المتنامي
peaceful means.
للآليات القضائية
We note
الدولية
the
بما
growing
في ذلك
role
المحكمة الدولية
played
لقانون
by
البحار
international judicial
وترسيخ
mechanisms
سيادة
in this sphere,
القانون
including
وضمان
the
التفسير
International
المتسق
Tribunal on the Law
والموحد
of the Sea, which
للمعايير
is
الدولية.
contributing to the rule of law
ثالثاً،
and the harmonized and
تعتبر
comprehensive
الجزائر أن مجلس
interpretation
الأمن
of relevant
يطلع
international norms.
بدور
Third,
محوري في
Algeria
معالجة
believes that the Security
التهديدات
Council must play a
التي تمس
pivotal role
بالأمن البحري
in
العالمي
tackling the threats
مع ضرورة تكامل جهوده
to
مع دور الجمعية
global
العامة
maritime
للأمم
security. We need
المتحدة
complementarity
بصفتها منبرا
between the
شاملا
efforts of the Council
لتعزيز
and those of the
التفاهم
General
الجماعي
Assembly.
وتطوير
The
أطر
General
التعاون
Assembly being a
المتعدد
global
الأطراف
forum
في هذا
which seeks to
المجال.
craft a common understanding
رابعاً،
and to promote relevant
تشدد
multilateral
الجزائر على
cooperation.
ضرورة أن
This
تتم
brings me to my fourth
كافة
point.
المبادرات الرامية إلى تعزيز
Algeria
الأمن البحري
believes that
في إطار
all
احترام السيادة
initiatives
الوطنية
aimed
للدول
at
وعدم
enhancing maritime
التدخل في
security
شؤونها
must be
الداخلية
pursued
وتسوية النزاعات
with
بالوسائل السلمية
due respect
انسجاما
for the sovereignty
مع
of states
المبادئ
without
الراسخة
interfering in their
لميثاق
internal
الأمم
affairs.
المتحدة. كما ترفض الجزائر
Furthermore,
أي
we need
توظيف
respect for the principles
انتقائي
enshrined in the
لمسألة
United
الأمن
Nations Charter. We
لتبرير
repudiate
إجراءات
all
أحادية
instrumentalization and
أو لفرض
attempts to
واقع
selectively address
غير مشروع
security
في
measures so as
الفضاءات
to impose
البحرية.
unilateral measures
خامساً،
or illicit situations in
تدعو
maritime
الجزائر
spaces.
إلى دعم جهود
Fifth,
الدول النامية
we call on the
ولا
international
سيما في
community
القارة
to
الإفريقية
support
من
developing
خلال
countries' efforts,
تمويل
especially
مستدام
African
لبناء
countries'
القدرات
efforts,
الوطنية
through
وتعزيز
lasting
المراقبة
financing
البحرية
for national capacity
وتوفير
building, maritime
التكنولوجيا
surveillance,
والتدريب بما
as well as
يمكنها
technology
من
transfer.
ممارسة
The objective being
ولايتها
to allow these
الكاملة
developing countries
على مجالاتها
to
البحرية ومكافحة
fully control
التهديدات
their
المتنامية.
jurisdiction over relevant
وفي هذا
maritime
السياق
areas and to combat
فإننا
mounting
نشيد
threats.
بالإطار
Against this backdrop,
الذي
we
أرساه
would like to
إعلان
commend
ياوندي
the framework that
لعام
was created by
2013
the Yaoundé
والآليات
architecture
المنبثقة عنه
in
والذي
2013,
يشكل
as well
خطوة
as related
محورية
mechanisms
نحو تعزيز
which
الأمن البحري في
mark a
خليج
significant
غينيا
step
من
forward
خلال
on the
مقاربة
path to strengthening
إقليمية
maritime security in the
تقوم على
Gulf of
التنسيق
Guinea.
وتبادل
And this thanks to a
المعلومات
regional
وبناء
approach
القدرات.
underpinned
and by coordination,
وتؤكد
information
الجزائر
exchange, and
على
capacity
أهمية
building.
الاستفادة من هذا النموذج
It is vital
وتعزيزه من
that
خلال
we
دعم
harness
دولي
this
مستدام
excellent model and
وشراكات
strengthen it
منصفة
by
بما
providing
يمكن
lasting
من
international
مواجهة
support and equitable
فعالة
partnerships so
للتهديدات
that we can
البحرية.
effectively counter the
سادساً
threats we face.
إيمانا منها بأهمية جعل البحر المتوسط فضاء سلام تقدم بلاد الجزائر سنوياً قراراً للجمعية العامة حول تعزيز الأمن والتعاون في منطقة البحر الأبيض المتوسط والذي يؤكد في آخر نسخة منه المعتمدة في 10 ديسمبر 2024 على الدور الرئيسي لبلدان البحر الأبيض المتوسط في تدعيم وتعزيز السلام والأمن والتعاون في المنطقة ويدعوها إلى توحيد جهودها لإزالة جميع أسباب التوتر في المنطقة وإيجاد حلول عادلة ودائمة للمشاكل المستمرة بالطرق السلمية. وختاما تجدد الجزائر التزامها التام بالمشاركة الفعالة في كافة الجهود الدولية الرامية إلى ضمان الأمن البحري وإيمانا منها بأن حماية البحار والمحيطات تمثل جزءا لا يتجزأ من نظام دولي قائم على السلم والعدالة والتنمية المستدامة للجميع. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, President, for convening today's important debate. Thank you also to Secretary-General António Guterres, Ms. Melina Travalos, and Mr. Christian Buger for your informative briefings. The United States agrees with Greece that this is an issue of critical importance for international peace and security. For this reason, President Trump directed firm action to safeguard maritime security and economic prosperity against many threats. Mr. President, some of these threats come from terrorist groups. For example, the Houthis have terrorized maritime traffic passing through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden for years, affecting 30% of all international container traffic. They have targeted multiple ships, killed innocent sailors, and hijacked the Galaxy Leader. At President Trump's direction, the United States took punishing action to defend freedom of navigation against the Houthis. Under pressure, the Houthis have backed down from attacking American ships, but they will face further punishing strikes if they attack U.S. vessels again. We condemn their continued attacks on Israel and support Israel's right to respond. Mr. President, some countries also pose serious threats. They support terrorist groups, bully other countries, or use coercion to disrupt maritime routes and trade. The Houthis were able to threaten Red Sea maritime traffic due largely to Iran's defiance of the UN arms embargo on the Houthis. This Council must not tolerate this defiance and should impose consequences for sanctions violations. Tehran does not threaten maritime security only through the support of terrorist groups, however. It also acts directly. Iran's repeated unlawful attacks on and seizure of commercial vessels transiting international waters is yet another threat to freedom of navigation. We call for Iran to release the vessels it still holds, including the MSC Ares and Advantage Suite. Mr. President, another threat to global maritime security is China. We have seen China's coercion time and again in the South China Sea and its aggressive actions in the Taiwan Strait. The theme of today's debate refers to international cooperation. The world should look at China's actions rather than its empty claims when judging its contributions to international cooperation. Let us remember, China dangerously obstructed a Philippine operation near Scarborough Reef, even as it touted leadership during its Security Council presidency in February. Throughout 2024, China unlawfully blocked the Philippines from accessing and exploiting its exclusive economic zone, undermining high seas freedoms for all countries. The United States stands with the Philippines. Once again, we condemn China's dangerous and unlawful actions in the South China Sea, and we call on China to abide by the 2016 arbitral ruling. Mr. President, to improve maritime security, we must also ensure the world's shipping lanes remain open to navigation and free from threats of violence, crime, and other illicit activities. The Houthis, as mentioned, continue to obtain arms in defiance of the Security Council's resolutions. The United States now sees evidence that the Houthis, in providing support to al-Shabaab, are acquiring dual-use components and imagery from China. The UN Verification and Inspection Mechanism, UNVIM, can be a critical tool in preventing those arms from reaching the Houthis via maritime routes. In fact, earlier this month, UNVIM successfully interdicted 4 shipping containers of illicit materials bound for Houthi-controlled ports. This interdiction clearly demonstrates the effectiveness of this mechanism. We all need to continue supporting its operations. To that point, we urge member states to donate directly to UNVIM, which needs only $11 million per year to operate at full capacity. President, the United States welcomes the recent collaboration between the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and the Malta-based Global Center for Maritime Sanctions Monitoring, also known as the Spinola Center, to provide capacity building, training, vessel tracking, and analysis to member states. We also strongly support the collaborative efforts of the Registry Information Sharing Compact, or RISC. RISC was founded by the flag registries of Panama, Liberia, and the Marshall Islands to combat the practice of flag hopping by vessels and shipping companies that are suspected of engaging in illicit practices, including UN sanctions violations. The RISC currently includes 15 shipping registries, representing more than 20% of the world's flagged vessels and nearly 50% of global gross tonnage. We urge registries that are not currently members of the RISC to join this important initiative, one that is quickly setting the global standard for compliance with international maritime law. Mr. President, once again, the United States thanks Greece for this initiative and looks forward to continued engagement on international efforts to counter maritime security threats. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of China.
弥佐塔吉斯总理阁下，
Your
我赞赏
Excellency,
希腊倡
Prime
议举行
Minister
本次
Mr.
会议，
Takis, I appreciate
也欢迎
Greece's
你专门
initiative
来纽约
in organizing
主持
this
今天的
meeting
公开
and
辩
welcome
论。
your presence in New York
我要
to
感谢
preside
古特
over
雷斯秘
today's
书长
open
和其他
debate.
几位
I
通报
thank
人
the
所做的
Secretary-General
通报。
Guterres and other briefers for their briefings.
主席，
President,
海洋孕育了生命，
oceans and seas
连通了
nurture
世界，
life, connect the
促进了
world,
发展，
and promote development.
是全人类
They
的
are the
共同
common
家园。
home of the entire
呵护
mankind.
共同家园，
Taking care of
维
our
护海
common
上安
home,
全，
maintaining
加
maritime
强全球
security,
海洋
and
治理，
strengthening global ocean
对促进
governance
世界和平
are
稳
of
定
great
与发展繁
significance to
荣
the promotion of
具
world
有
peace,
重要意义，
stability,
也是各国的共同
development
责
and
任。
prosperity, and a common responsibility
我
for
们
all
要秉持
countries.
海洋命运共同体理
We
念，
must uphold the concept
人类共
of a
同居住
maritime
在这
community
个蓝色
with a
星
shared
球，
future.
没有
This
被
blue
海洋分
planet
割
that
成
we
各个
share
孤岛，
does not consist
而
of
是被海
isolated
洋
islands
连接
separated
成
by
了命
oceans,
运共同
but
体。
is one connected by oceans
海洋
as
的
a
和平安
community
宁
with a
关
shared
乎
future.
世界各国的
The
安
peace
危
and tranquility
和
of
利
the
益。
oceans is a matter of concern
我
for
们
the
要秉
safety
持
and
共商
interests of
共
all
建共
countries
享
in the
精神，
world. We must
共
uphold
护
the
海洋
spirit
安
of
全，
achieving shared
共
growth
促
through
海洋
consultations and collaboration, and jointly safeguard maritime security, promote maritime development, and discuss ocean governance so that the oceans can truly become a bond for us to promote exchanges and win-win cooperation rather than an abyss that separates and disconnects us from each other. We must maintain a just and reasonable maritime order. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea has established a basic legal framework for the modern order of the oceans and has played an important role in promoting global ocean governance. Together with other sea-related treaties and customary international law, the Convention provides legal norms for the determination of maritime zones and conduct of maritime activities. All countries need to safeguard the maritime order underpinned by international law. UNCLOS should be interpreted and applied accurately, comprehensively, and in its entirety. Selectivity and double standards must be rejected. We must work together to maintain maritime security and stability. At present, pirate attacks, drugs and arms smuggling, and human trafficking at sea, and other criminal activities are rampant, jeopardizing maritime security and exacerbating regional instability. The international community must work together to prevent and combat these problems in accordance with international law. We should pay attention to the legitimate and relevant Security Council resolutions. We should pay attention to the legitimate and reasonable maritime security concerns of all countries, insist on resolving disputes and conflicts through dialogue and consultation, continuously improve the crisis communication mechanism, and strengthen maritime security cooperation. Specific disputes involving territorial and maritime rights and interests should be resolved peacefully through friendly consultations between parties directly involved. It is not in anyone's interest to stir up confrontation between maritime camps or to engage in a zero-sum game. We should join hands to strengthen global ocean governance. The sustainable development of mankind is closely related to a healthy marine environment. We must take care of the ocean and protect it as we do with our lives. At present, issues such as maritime environmental protection, climate change, sea level rise, and emerging maritime activities are of common interest to the international community. We should follow the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a guideline, expand practical cooperation at sea, explore potentials of the oceans, and jointly promote development and utilization of the oceans to serve economic and social development so as to realize the harmonious coexistence of man and ocean. As a major maritime nation, China is committed to the common guardianship of maritime homeland and maintenance of common maritime security. Will always be a builder of global ocean governance, a promoter of sustainable development of oceans and seas, and defender of global maritime security and stability. We stand ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to promote the building of an ocean order of peace and tranquility and win-win cooperation, and to build together a maritime community with a shared future. President, the Security Council is not an appropriate place to discuss the South China Sea issue. Just now, in a statement, the United States representative mentioned the South China Sea issue, to which China is firmly opposed, and we will respond as such. 1. The United States, under the banner of the freedom of navigation, it sent its military vessels to the South China Sea and to flex its muscles and stir up the confrontation. United States itself is the biggest threat to the peace and stability of the South China Sea. 2. In respect to the historical facts and the international law, and China adhere to the appropriate resolution of our differences on the basis of historical fact and international law. The so-called award on the South China Sea arbitration cases is illegal and invalid, which China neither accepts nor recognizes.
在中国和东盟国家共同努力下，当前南海的局势总体保持稳定。
Development and common efforts of China and ASEAN countries, the current situation in the South China Sea remains generally stable. We're confident that we're able to make the South China Sea a sea of peace, a sea of friendship, and a sea of cooperation.
我们希望美方
we hope that
能够恪守他们在一个中国问题上所做的承诺。
and will honor their commitment on the issues regarding China.
就我想提醒一下 我的美国同事，
I wish to remind my
我不
US
知道他
colleagues
发现没有，
that I don't know if he
他的发言
realized
与
that
刚才其他国家的发
his
言
speech
显得多么的格格不入。
is in stark contrast to what
秘书长的
the
发
other
言，
statements
大
made
家的
by
发
other
言
colleagues.
都在
The
围绕如
statements
何维
made
护海上
by
安全
the
开展
Secretary-General
国
as
际
well
合
as
作。
our colleagues all revolve around
美
how
国
we
的发
can
言
carry out
却借
cooperations
机
and
对
to
其他国
safeguard
家
maritime
进行
security,
肆意的
while the
攻击
United
和抹
States
黑，
take advantage of the
肆意地
opportunity
进行
to
打
attack
压。
other countries.
我们希望美国也能同各国一
And
道，
we hope
能
that the
为维
United
护海
States
上安全
can
发挥建设性的作用。
play a constructive role together with other countries in maintenance of the maritime security. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of China for the statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President,
господин премьер-министр,
Prime Minister,
приветствуем ваше личное участие в сегодняшних
we
открытых
welcome your
дебатах.
personal participation in
Благодарим
today's open
генерального
debate.
секретаря и
We
бриферов
thank
за их
the
брифинг.
SG and the briefers for their briefings.
Считаем предложенную греческим председательством
We
тему
believe that the
актуальной.
topic proposed by the Greek
Вопросы
presidency is
морской
most topical.
безопасности занимают важное место в архитектуре
Maritime
глобальной
security issues
безопасности,
occupy an
стабильности.
important place in the architecture of global stability and security, and without a doubt they deserve the attention of responsible members of the international community. Having said that, we should underscore that the majority of problems we're discussing at today's debate, transnational organized crime, the illicit arms trade, drugs trafficking, human trafficking, and the illegal exploitation of marine resources, they are not part of the Security Council's remit. Rather, they fall within the purview of other UN system bodies, first and foremost the UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, as well as the Third Committee of the General Assembly. All these challenges, without a doubt, are very serious, but they should be considered in the relevant fora, which possess the relevant expertise. Thus, when it comes to maritime security, the Security Council should focus on those aspects which pose a direct threat to international peace and stability. What falls within this category, by the way, is the risk of global supply chain disruption, mentioned in the concept note prepared for today's event. We note that of late we've seen an increased number of actions aimed at creating artificial impediments and threats to maritime trade. The stability of this trade is important for all countries. For small island states and for coastal developing countries, in particular, it is a matter of survival. The actions I mentioned build upon the so-called unilateral coercive measures. Western states, and especially EU member states, favorite way of imposing on others their own political paradigms and preferences, which are at times rather exotic. UCMs are a priori illegal. Their use contravenes international law. Hence, Western countries' attempts to justify their illegal actions at sea by referring to the UCMs they themselves introduced is at odds with a maxim that dates back to the times of Roman law. No party can take undue advantage of its own wrongdoing. References to supposed attempts to circumvent UCMs are used to label some vessels as belonging to the so-called shadow fleet. This term isn't internationally recognized, nor is there any transparent international mechanism underpinning it. Actions against civilian vessels at sea are flagrant and unprecedented. They're comparable, perhaps, to piracy, the difference being that it's NATO countries that are trying on the role of Baltic Sea pirates for size. The internet was recently awash with images of Estonian patrol vessels trying to seize by force a tanker sailing in international waters. The captain of the vessel was given an ultimatum: change course and sail into Estonian territorial waters. 2 attempts were made by an assault team to board the tanker from a helicopter. When they failed to do so, an Estonian Navy craft literally tried to ram the tanker. All this was done on the pretext, a pretext which is underpinned by no international legal grounds, the pretext of combating the shadow fleet. This is not the first such instance. There were others as well. Such actions, even in territorial waters, would have been a flagrant violation of the right of peaceful passage. In international waters, they are an attack on the freedom of navigation. These are fundamental norms of customary international law codified in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea dating back to 1982. The inviolability of these norms, as well as of the principle of flag state exclusivity, has ensured the stability and predictability of the international maritime trade system. This is why UNCLOS contains a closed and rather limited list of situations in which a vessel flying a foreign flag may be stopped for inspection. You won't find, neither in the list nor in the convention as a whole, a single mention of the so-called shadow fleet. We'd therefore like to remind you, and remind the newly minted Baltic pirates and their EU cheerleaders, that stopping a vessel on any other grounds not listed in the convention is by definition a grave attack on the freedom of navigation and the right of peaceful passage or transit passage. The unacceptable behavior of EU countries, therefore, sets a dangerous precedent. Were other states to follow in their footsteps, global supply chains would be disrupted and maritime trade would simply grind to a halt. They've made a habit of conducting such illicit actions using NATO naval capabilities. This part leads directly to military escalation and to serious threats being posed to maritime security. President, another example of Western states' actions to undermine maritime security is the terrorist attack committed against 2 Nord Stream gas pipelines in September of 2022. This was in the Baltic Sea. This crime was committed in Danish and Swedish exclusive economic zones, outside any armed conflict zone. These attacks had the most serious environmental consequences, as well as consequences for energy and freedom of shipping. Despite the fact that since the Nord Stream pipeline terrorist attacks, almost 3 years have elapsed. Those who organized it and executed these attacks have neither been identified nor held accountable. The Russian Federation has on many occasions raised this issue at the Security Council. We've proposed crafting a product which would have set an unambiguous signal about the need to conduct a comprehensive investigation into what happened with the participation of all interested parties. And yet all of our initiatives were blocked by Western members of the Council on every occasion. Meanwhile, Germany, Denmark and Sweden deliberately cut us off from the investigation. The conclusion that was drawn by the so-called investigators is that the gas pipelines were in fact blown up after all. This is the real cost of Western delegations' statements today about their supposed concern about maritime security. We believe that it is your actions which pose a direct threat to maritime security, as well as inaction on accountability for specific crimes targeting cross-border undersea infrastructure. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to the Greek presidency for convening this important and timely discussion. We also extend a warm welcome to the Secretary-General António Guterres and thank him for his comprehensive briefings. We also want to thank Mr. Avlos and Professor Bueger for their briefings. Mr. President, for Somalia and for Africa as a whole, the security and sustainable management of our maritime domain are matters of deep significance. Our waters are essential not only for the economic well-being of our people, but also for the regional integration and maintenance of international peace and security. Yet, as a coastal state, we continue to face an evolving array of risks, including illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. IUU fishing not only depletes our marine resources, but it also causes severe degradation and lasting, sometimes irreversible damage to vital ocean ecosystems. These threats are transnational in nature and thus demand coordinated, cooperative response with affected nations at the center of the solution. Allow me to highlight 4 key priorities. First, capacity building and technology transfer. It's widely recognized that efforts to address maritime threats are most effective when states possess the necessary capabilities. Many countries, particularly in Africa, continue to require sustained support to strengthen maritime law, enforcement and surveillance, and judicial processes. We underscore the importance of tailored training, access to advanced technology, and investment in human and institutional resources. The African Union's 2050 Africa's Integrated Maritime Strategy and the Lomé Charter clearly articulate such priorities, serving as an important roadmap for national and regional resilience. We call upon the international community to build a stronger partnership and targeted support to help develop the capacity of coastal states in eradicating maritime threats. Second, deepening regional and international cooperation. No single state can address these challenges in isolation. My delegation has benefited from the support and partnership of regional neighbors, international organizations, and naval coalitions. African Union's mechanism and the Djibouti Code of Conduct, a notable example of the framework designed to facilitate information sharing, joint operations, and harmonized legal approaches. It's essential that such cooperation continue to be strengthened while fully respecting the sovereignty and the leadership of the coastal states at every step of the way. Third, we believe effective maritime security requires a coordinated approach that addresses the root causes. It's important to recognize that maritime security is closely linked to the sustainable development on land. Poverty, unemployment, and lack of opportunity often drive individuals toward criminal activities at sea. A holistic approach that addresses the root causes must acknowledge the disappropriate impact of maritime crimes on vulnerable coastal communities and developing nations and help them address the systematic issues that allow them to persist, including eradicating of IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. The African Union's Blue Economy Initiative, which aims to foster sustainable livelihood and responsible stewardship of marine resources, represent a critical avenue for addressing the underlying drivers of maritime insecurity. We encourage greater international support for these initiatives, which are vital for ensuring long-term stability. Fourth, upholding the international law. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, and other relevant instruments provide the legal foundation for a peaceful and a cooperative use of our oceans. Respect for these obligations and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of coastal states is essential for building trust and ensuring effective cooperation. Somalia attaches great importance to the full and effective implementation of these frameworks and encourages continued international assistance for littoral states working to develop and align national legislation accordingly. To conclude, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its commitment to working constructively with the Council members and the wider international community to realize the vision of the seas that are safe, secure, and prosperous and governed by the law of all. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Greece for having taken the initiative to organize this meeting on maritime security. And, of course, I welcome you, Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, as well as Mr. Petritis. I'd like to thank the Secretary-General for his statement, as well as Madam Travlos and Mr. Buga for their own briefings. Firstly, the security of maritime areas involves above all respect for international law. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea defines the legal framework covering all maritime activities. France reiterates its attachment to the freedom of navigation in respect for our international obligations. Without respect for common norms, transnational threats to which we have to provide a collective and coordinated response. The hindrances to freedom of navigation constitute a serious security threat. Off the coast of Yemen, the Houthis, supported by Iran, must stop their destabilizing activities and their violations of the arms embargo. In Resolution 2722 of 2024, this Council recalled the right that member states have, in accordance with international law, to defend their ships against these attacks. Criminal groups violate maritime security in order to get involved in other trafficking activities, particularly trafficking in migrants, as we see in the Mediterranean, and trafficking in drugs, particularly between Latin America and Europe. Illicit transshipment is used in order to circumvent sanctions regimes put in place by the Council in order to combat the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. The Security Council must remain vigilant in the face of the violations of these resolutions, and states must strengthen their efforts to surveil maritime traffic in order to respond to this threat, as well as phantom fleets. Thirdly, France is committed to fighting maritime insecurity in a number of regions in the world. In the Gulf of Guinea, France supports our African partners in cooperation in the assessment of maritime situations and maritime security activities, and in efforts to combat illicit activities as part of the Yaoundé architecture. We support the region through European initiatives, in particular through the coordinated maritime presence in the area in the Gulf of Guinea, and we are involved on a national level through Operation Corimbe. This effort to protect the oceans is also carried out in the northwest of the Indian Ocean. France continues our strictly defensive action within the European Union operations, be that UNAVFOR and ASPIDES, to ensure freedom of navigation off the coast of Yemen, and in Atalanta to combat piracy in the Gulf of Aden. In the Mediterranean, Operation Irini, we are involved in Operation Irini in the operational implementation of the arms embargo off the coast of Libya, combating trafficking of all kinds. Respect for the freedom of navigation is essential in all seas and oceans. In the Black Sea, it is necessary for food security and the global supply chains. Since the launching of the Russian aggression against Ukraine in February of 2022, France has supported efforts aimed at guaranteeing protection of merchant shipping and the export of grain through the Black Sea. In Asia, France remains concerned at the situation in the South China Sea, where freedoms of the high seas cannot be called into question. We are opposed to any recourse to the use of force or coercion, and we call for a peaceful settlement of any disputes. Fourth point, maritime security also goes hand in hand with the protection of the marine environment, the fight against pollution and climate change. France has assumed its responsibilities for the protection of the ocean and the sustainable management of resources. It's in this spirit that together we decided, together with Costa Rica, to host in Nice next June the United Nations Oceans Conference. In Nice, significant progress is expected in the area of decarbonization of maritime transport and also the fight against plastic pollution. France calls upon all states that have not yet done so to sign and ratify rapidly the International Treaty for the Protection of the High Seas and Marine Biodiversity, the BBNJ. France is concerned by recent requests for the issuance outside the framework of the International Seabed Authority of operating licenses for the extraction of mineral resources on the high seas. This would constitute a violation of international law, particularly the principle that these resources belong to the common heritage of humanity. In the face of these challenges, we need collective, resolute and coherent action to strengthen maritime security and protect our maritime spaces. Thank you. I thank you for your statement.
To the representative of Slovenia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And we are thanking Greece for organizing today's debate. Your presence here today, Mr. Prime Minister, is also demonstrating the commitment of Greece, not only to maritime security, but to the UN and to the role of the Security Council. Thank you for that. I also thank the Secretary-General and Mrs. Travlos and Berger for presenting their perspectives on this important topic that directly or indirectly touches all states. Throughout history, oceans covering 75% of Earth's surface have been the backbone of human activity on livelihood, trade, and development, but also military action. Currently, maritime transport represents 80% of the volume of global trade and goods, making it a critical factor for development and prosperity of states. And both briefers today reminded us of recent cases proving this point. International trade depends on a stable and secure environment. That makes maritime security our common interest and concern. While we may name the seas and oceans differently, they are all one body of water, making cooperation among states crucial. And in this context, I would like to make 3 points. First, we fully concur with Secretary-General's stress on the need to respect international law. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea provides the main legal framework for this cooperation. States are obliged to implement their responsibilities in good faith and take all necessary measures to prevent potential abuses. In cases where violations occur, accountability must be ensured. States must also ensure the implementation of Security Council resolutions, including on maritime sanctions, and prevent possible evasion, especially through flag hopping, AIS spoofing, and similar measures. Secondly, about the maintenance of maritime security, be it off the coast of Somalia or the Gulf of Guinea or Houthis attacks on shipping lanes in the Red Sea. We must find a way to comprehensively tackle smuggling, illegal trafficking, piracy, and terrorism. While speaking about prevention of maritime smuggling and illegal trafficking, we should also address prevention of illicit maritime transfers of weapons of mass destruction and the dual use of goods in line with international law. Slovenia remains committed to contributing to maritime security, including through EU's
three naval operations just mentioned by my French colleague. Irini, which through inspections assists in implementation of the arms embargo off the coast of Libya. Atalanta, that helps fight piracy and armed robbery at sea off the coast of Somalia. And Aspides, with a defensive mandate in the Red Sea. We firmly believe that regional arrangements and activities can play an important role in the wider framework of international security engagement, including on maritime security. Mr. President, most concerns regarding physical insecurity of shipping lanes relate to impacts on global supply chains and international maritime trade. Slovenia is, however, also extremely concerned about the other broader impacts, especially environmental disasters from oil spills, cargo incidents, or other toxic discharges. Maritime security must address climate resilience as rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and maritime biodiversity loss threaten coastal communities and global stability. Thirdly, about the use of new technologies. It is necessary to invest in equipment and capacity building to ensure both safety and security of port infrastructure and maritime domain awareness. Only this way, the states can address and counter maritime security threats such as terrorism, piracy, and armed robbery, smuggling and trafficking of goods, persons, and drugs, and irregular migration. In most cases, these threats are enhanced by technological innovations and advanced equipment. We need to be ready to face the evolving maritime security challenges. Use of new technologies, combined with development of digital skills and cybersecurity, can substantially contribute to the ability and capacity of littoral states to ensure safety and security and risk management of maritime and coastal areas. So to conclude, Mr. President, oceans and waterways are our shared planetary resource, infrastructure, and vital environment. They are also our shared responsibility. In order to utilize them fully and sustainably, it has to be done properly by protecting them from environmental degradation and destruction, and by ensuring maritime security for all stakeholders. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Slovenia for his statement, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Guyana welcomes Greece's leadership and your participation in today's high-level meeting on strengthening maritime security through international cooperation for global stability, a topic of great importance for Guyana, as it is for the rest of the global community. We also thank Secretary-General Guterres for his insightful remarks, and Mrs. Melina Travlos and Professor Christian Bueger for their briefings. Mr. President, global cooperation is not just a desirable option, but a necessity when it comes to maritime security. Just using one metric, the fact that over 80% of the volume of all global trade in goods is carried by sea makes such cooperation indispensable for global stability. Together, the global community must be able to adequately respond to traditional and evolving challenges in the maritime domain. These include piracy, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, cybersecurity threats, threats against offshore installations, violations of established maritime boundaries, transboundary crimes, the protection and preservation of the marine environment, and the impacts of climate change. Protecting ports and related infrastructure is also a critical part of a holistic approach to maritime security, one that will guarantee the level of protection needed to secure vital global supply chains. Recent threats to maritime navigation have exposed the vulnerabilities of maritime global trade routes and caused widespread disruptions to global trade and supply chains. The implications for national security were also acutely felt in many countries, thereby underscoring the urgent need for enhanced maritime security. From attacks on merchant and commercial vessels in the Red Sea to the conflict in Ukraine and its impact on shipping routes in the Black Sea, the disruptions to global shipping in the past 3 years have had far-reaching consequences, including on global food and energy security. For example, the attacks in the Red Sea resulted in increased transit times and shipping costs as shipping lines rerouted trade around the Cape of Good Hope. In addition to financial implications, the extended routes contributed to higher greenhouse gas emissions, exacerbating environmental concerns. Guyana commenced the proactive and collaborative efforts which led to the Black Sea Grain Initiative in 2022 and the diplomatic efforts that led to the recent cessation of attacks against vessels in the Red Sea. We hope that these will reinvigorate collaboration on maritime safety and security. Mr. President, Guyana would like to emphasize the following 4 points. First, member states must uphold the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the primary international framework for maritime governance. Second, Guyana acknowledges the work of the International Maritime Organization in promoting safe and secure shipping while ensuring freedom of navigation. We commend the 2024 updated technical cooperation profile through its all-hands-on-deck strategy, and is of the view that the menu of strategic proposals, including capacity building, investment in new systems, maritime infrastructure, and technology projects, is relevant to the discourse. Third, in several parts of the world, geopolitical friction and conflicts are shaping how states and non-state actors utilize maritime spaces for power projection and influence. This underscores the need for a higher premium to be placed on international cooperation through dialogue rather than competition, as the eventual fallout is usually felt by all, irrespective of geography and physical distance. Finally, Mr. President, the threats to maritime navigation and operations continue to evolve as the effects of climate change compound traditional challenges. Warming in the Arctic Ocean, for instance, with ice melting at an increasing rate, will have far-reaching consequences, including rising sea levels. Investments in early warning systems must go hand in hand with the application of affordable technologies to address existing vulnerabilities, including the impacts of climate change on maritime navigation. We also call for international cooperation in areas of technology transfer, information sharing and governance, including on the use of AI. In conclusion, Mr. President, maritime security requires a strong collaborative approach from the local to the global levels. We must use all available tools to foster such approach if we are to tackle maritime security in a holistic manner. I thank you.
We thank the representative of Guyana, and I would now like to give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, for convening this important meeting and for the Greek presidency's leadership on this issue. I also thank Secretary-General Guterres, Ms. Travlos, and Mr. Boyga for briefing us today. The United Kingdom, like Greece, has a long maritime history and is deeply committed to global maritime security. And global action is needed to tackle the growing threats we now face to our seas, our peoples, and our shared prosperity. That is why the UK is strongly committed to our partnership within NATO and the Joint Expeditionary Force, and with wider friends and partners, as a means to contribute to our collective security. That includes working together with states across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean to address threats wherever they occur. Our carrier strike group's deployment to the Indo-Pacific is a sign of our commitment to work with our partners in a region of fundamental. That's alongside efforts to confront the so-called Shadow Fleet operation. In the Middle East, we've acted to prevent Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping, including through Operation Prosperity Guardian, with the United States and others. Our European colleagues have joined these efforts through Operation Aspides. We thank Greece for its leading role, including the hosting of the command from Larissa. We also call for collective efforts to ensure that the arms embargo as set out in Resolution 2216 is upheld and to support Yemen's Coast Guard. We equally need to ensure the implementation of the arms embargo off the coast of Libya, and we call for the renewal of the mandate this month for Operation Irini. More broadly, our partnership with Greece is an example of how cooperation can protect our countries from maritime threats, including illegal migration and drug smuggling. Alongside this, we are delivering legal changes at home to tackle people smuggling rings and starve them of income. And the UK also remains strongly committed to upholding freedom of navigation and the primacy of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. President, in the face of such diverse threats, we must redouble our shared efforts, including by broadening collaboration on strategic challenges within the International Maritime Organization, which the UK is proud to host. And as we look to the future, we must strengthen our work together, both in this Council and through our bilateral partnerships, to secure our seas for future generations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the Greek presidency for convening this important meeting on maritime security, and I thank the Secretary-General for his insightful briefing. My appreciation also goes to President Melina and Professor Bieger for their briefings. As a peninsula nation with a profound interest in maritime security, the Republic of Korea welcomes this timely open debate. From attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea to enduring piracy in the Gulf of Guinea and off the coast of Somalia, maritime threats call for a more coordinated response. Central to such a response is the consistent upholding of UNCLOS, which provides a rules-based governance. Underscoring the critical need to defend its core principles, including the freedom of navigation, let me highlight the following three key areas where the Security Council's role is essential. First, we must enhance collective responses to transnational maritime crimes. From the Caribbean, where maritime borders are exploited for drug and arms trafficking, to the Mediterranean, where criminal networks persist in using coastal routes for smuggling and exploitation, transnational maritime crimes pose serious threats to regional stability and security, which no single state can address alone. For our part, Korea has actively engaged in a range of initiatives aimed at countering such crimes, including the contact group on piracy off the coast of Somalia and the regional cooperation on combating piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia. We call upon all member states to contribute their capabilities and resources to these crucial collective efforts. Second, the duty to protect civilian vessels and the seafarers must be met at all times. As clearly demonstrated by recent Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea, merchant ships remain vulnerable to a range of threats. These include armed conflict, cyber interference like GPS jamming, and unlawful seizures. And with shipping traffic in the Red Sea reportedly down by 50% since 2023, it is evident that such assaults jeopardize not only the lives of seafarers, but global trade and economic security as well. Likewise, North Korea's missile launches, conducted without prior notice or sufficient navigational warnings, endanger the safety of civilian vessels in the region. To address such immediate threats and safeguard critical sea lanes, it is vital to enhance information sharing and ensure coordinated naval presence in high-risk waters. For instance, we have been actively participating in combined maritime forces in the Middle East, as well as deploying naval units to the Gulf of Aden. Third, the Council must act in a more decisive manner when maritime space is exploited to facilitate the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We remain deeply concerned about the DPRK's persistent illicit maritime activities in violation of Security Council resolutions. Its evasion tactics for trading prohibited items range from ship-to-ship transfers, flag concealment, to forced registration and the manipulation of automatic identification system. These evolving activities continue to fund DPRK's unlawful nuclear and missile programs. Yet, the enforcement of maritime sanctions is often undermined by jurisdictional gaps, limited capacity, and the lack of political will. Moreover, the disbandment of the 1718 Committee's panel of experts by one permanent member of the Security Council has further weakened monitoring and compliance. Security Council resolutions regarding the DPRK stipulate that member states are obligated to seize, inspect, and freeze any vessel within their ports. If there are reasonable grounds to believe the vessel is involved in activities prohibited by the resolutions, and may take these measures in their territorial waters as well. Resolution 2375 has also called upon member states to inspect vessels on the high seas that are reasonably suspected of carrying prohibited cargo with the consent of flag state. In this regard, the Republic of Korea will continue working closely with its partners to share information and coordinate actions both at sea and in the air to deter and disrupt the DPRK's maritime violations. We are also committed to supporting maritime enforcement capacities of developing countries and the key flag states. In closing, Mr. President, we hope today's debate serves as a necessary step forward to maintain the stability of the sea, the global commons on which we all depend. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement. The representative of Denmark has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Mr. President, I would have preferred not to ask for the floor again, but I need to respond to the comments by a council member on the Nord Stream sabotage. Denmark is very concerned about attacks against critical infrastructure. We take the sabotage against the Nord Stream pipelines seriously and have, together with Germany and Sweden, kept the Security Council thoroughly informed throughout the investigation process. We have done so both orally and through numerous notes throughout 2022, 2023, and 2024. We note that there is an ongoing, robust, and credible criminal investigation being undertaken in Germany, and we have the full confidence that this investigation is being conducted in an impartial and comprehensive manner in line with all relevant rules and procedures. It's important that we let this ongoing investigation run its course. Denmark has had close cooperation with relevant foreign authorities, especially concerning the technical aspects of the investigations. The Russian authorities have been informed continually about the progress of our investigations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 3 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 3 minutes. I now give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honored to deliver this statement on behalf of His Excellency Dr. Badr Al-Ati, Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who wished to participate in this meeting but couldn't due to prior commitments. We congratulate the Presidency for convening this important debate on maritime security. I also thank the SG and all the briefers for their insightful updates. Mr. President, today's debate comes at a time of unprecedented strains on the global maritime domain, strains that underscore the extent to which maritime security has become inseparable from regional crises, geopolitical tensions, and unresolved conflicts. It is a reminder that oceans and sea lanes that bind our world together are also susceptible to divisions that afflict us on land. Nowhere is this more evident than in the Red Sea, which has in recent months become a theater for threats against freedom of navigation and commerce. This escalation, manifesting in repeated unlawful attacks on commercial shipping, cannot be viewed in isolation from the broader regional context. It is regrettably a direct outgrowth of the deteriorating situation in the Middle East, and in particular the ongoing and inhumane Israeli war on the Gaza Strip. Mr. President, Egypt cannot but express its profound concern and condemnation for the continued Israeli war on Gaza, which has inflicted massive human suffering and led to destabilizing an already volatile region. The protracted hostilities and the humanitarian crises unfolding on the ground have created ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate vicinity of the conflict. They are indeed reverberating across maritime domains, most acutely in the Red Sea. The ensuing regional polarization, coupled with the exploitation of maritime routes by non-state actors, has disrupted supply chains and compromised the freedom of navigation. In this regard, there can be no lasting maritime security in the region without addressing the underlying drivers of instability, first and foremost the situation in Gaza. In addition to the escalating tensions in Yemen, the road to restoring safe navigation through the Red Sea and other strategic waterways starts with serious de-escalatory steps, paving the way for lasting political solutions. In this regard, Egypt welcomes the ceasefire agreement reached between the United States and the Houthis after the commendable efforts of the Sultanate of Oman. It is a step towards regional de-escalation, and it is our hope that it will pave the way for a broader resolution that ensures the freedom of maritime navigation. Mr. President, the impact of regional escalation has been significant on Egypt. As the custodian of the Suez Canal, Egypt faced immense repercussions from the deteriorating security environment. In 2024, Egypt witnessed a revenue loss of $7 billion due to the decrease in navigation through the Red Sea. Despite these challenges, Egypt spared no effort in sustaining the canal's pivotal role in global trade and supply chain networks. We adopted a forward-looking strategy to ensure that Suez Canal remains a reliable and secure transit route. Egypt accelerated investment in the Suez Canal economic zone, transforming it into a globally competitive hub for logistics, advanced manufacturing, and green industries. We remain committed to maintaining the security and efficiency of the canal, and we took positive note of the international support aimed at safeguarding this vital passage. We also reaffirmed that any initiatives related to maritime security and development in the Red Sea must be designed in close consultation with the Red Sea littoral states, who are best positioned to understand the dynamics of the region. We are equally concerned about reports of growing cooperation between armed non-state actors in the region, including the smuggling of arms, which further undermines maritime security. These illicit networks must be addressed through enhanced regional cooperation and monitoring mechanisms and upholding relevant Security Council resolutions. Egypt underscores the importance of adopting a comprehensive approach to maritime security, one that embraces cooperation, capacity building, and institutional resilience. We encourage cooperation between states, developing early warning mechanisms and collaboration between the public and private sectors in the maritime domain. We call upon the Security Council to remain seized of evolving threats to maritime security, including cyber attacks, the proliferation of advanced weaponry, and the risks posed by non-state actors. The international legal framework, particularly UNCLOS, remains very relevant to alleviating tensions. In conclusion, Egypt reaffirms its commitment to upholding maritime security as an essential pillar of international peace. We will continue playing our part as the guardian of the Suez Canal and as a responsible member of the international community in promoting cooperation, stability, and the safe passage in our region and beyond. I do thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Egypt for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Thailand.
Mr. President, my delegation would like to commend Greece for convening this very timely and important debate, and to express our thanks to Secretary-General Guterres for his insights. Maritime security is not only a matter of strategic interest, but a matter of shared responsibility for humanity. Today, Thailand wishes to highlight the following key points. First, to enhance maritime security and stability, we must respect international law, including, of course, the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which serves as the legal framework governing all activities in the oceans and seas. A secure, predictable, and rule-based maritime order grounded in international law is vital for global peace and shared prosperity. Second, concerted efforts among member states are essential to ensure effective and timely responses to evolving and transboundary maritime security challenges. Maritime domain awareness, including through information sharing, joint exercises, and capacity building, is critical to countering maritime threats and safeguarding the peaceful maritime domain. Third, we must speed up our collective actions to the sustainable and equitable use of maritime resources. In this regard, President, Thailand remains determined to intensify efforts to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. We are working toward maritime spatial planning as part of Thailand's blue economy, and the ratification to the agreement under UNCLOS on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Mr. President, maritime security is a core pillar of Thailand's comprehensive security strategy. We actively engage within ASEAN and its platforms, as well as other multilateral frameworks, such as IMO and UNODC, in fostering substantive cooperation to address shared maritime security threats. And we are now looking forward to the deliberations at the third UN Ocean Conference next month in France. In closing, allow me to reiterate that a global commitment to international maritime cooperation is vital, not only for national defense, but also for advancing sustainable development, economic prosperity, and connectivity. We must ensure that our oceans remain open, peaceful, and sustainable for present and future generations. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Thailand for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Romania.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to commend the Greek presidency for organizing this high-level open debate. In addition to the statement to be delivered by the European Union, I would like to add a few points. Maritime security is a cross-cutting topic facing unprecedented threats, as we also heard from the briefers today. And the international community needs to first ensure that international law is upheld and respected on all oceans and seas, and second, to reaffirm the role of UNCLOS as the legal framework for all activities in oceans and seas. It is imperative that freedoms and obligations established under UNCLOS, including the freedom of navigation and overflight, are respected, and the Security Council plays an important role. Mr. Chair, all seas should remain free, stable, and safe. We all benefit from that. The Black Sea is of strategic importance for global resilience. Maritime security in the Black Sea is therefore vital. Freedom of navigation for commercial shipping must be upheld, and any attempts to restrict such freedom or to expand maritime jurisdiction by force must be rejected. The security environment in the Black Sea and the region's critical role in the resilience of global supply chains east-west and north-south are undermined by the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. The consequences extend well beyond the region, especially on food and energy security. Floating mines and incidents such the one in September 2024, when a missile hit a merchant vessel under the third country flag carrying grain from Ukraine, underscore the magnitude of the threat in the Black Sea as the Russian aggression against Ukraine continues. We underline the importance of a full ceasefire in Ukraine, including in the maritime area. Romania supports any steps towards a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine, in line with international law and the UN Charter. This will also remove existing threats to navigation in the Black Sea, and Romania is ready to contribute to the implementation of a maritime ceasefire. Romania addressed existing challenges in the Black Sea in a responsible manner, in line with international law and in the spirit of solidarity. We recall our steady engagement to ensure the continuity of supply chains for grain from Ukraine to global markets. Our joint work with riparian countries, including Turkey and Bulgaria, on demining in the Black Sea also supports this effort. Mr. President, similarly as Greece, Romania is a country with seafarers and various international shipping lanes. We pay particular attention to the safety and security of merchant and commercial vessels and their crews. We are concerned about the increasing number of incidents and attacks to international shipping, such as those committed by the Houthis in the Red Sea. We call for the end of any such attacks on all oceans and seas. Romania welcomes the release of a crew of MV Galaxy Leader, including a Romanian citizen after more than a year of unlawful detention by the Houthis, and we wish to thank again all those involved in this complex effort. We appreciate the efforts of the Security Council and all of those countries that have engaged to restore freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. We welcome the ceasefire agreement reached between the United States and the Houthis. We recall the contribution of EU maritime Operation Aspides to protect freedom of navigation and maritime security in the Red Sea, and we appreciate the operation's leadership, and we reiterate our full cooperation. Mr. President, abiding by the UN Charter, international law and fundamental principles and rules of the law of the sea is the prerequisite for strengthening maritime security and addressing existing challenges. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Romania for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President,
México felicita a
Mexico
Grecia
would like to
por su
congratulate
iniciativa de
Greece
convocar
on your
a este
initiative
debate
to
abierto
convene this
en su
open
calidad
debate
de
in your
presidente
quality
del Consejo
as
de
President
Seguridad.
of the Security Council.
Reconocemos el valor
We
de generar
recognize the value
espacios
of
para
creating these
dialogar
spaces
sobre
to
cómo
have a dialogue
fortalecer
on how
la
we can
cooperación
strengthen
internacional
international
para combatir
cooperation
las
in order
amenazas
to
a la
combat
seguridad
threats
marítima,
to maritime
componente
security,
esencial
which is an
para la
essential
paz y la
component
estabilidad
of international
internacional.
peace and security.
Desde tiempos inmemoriales,
Since time immemorial,
pasando por la edad de los
including
imperios
during the era
marítimos,
of maritime
la
empires,
seguridad en los
the
mares
security
ha sido
of the
fuente
seas
de
has been
agudos
a source
conflictos,
of heightened
así como de
conflict,
hondas
as well as of
reflexiones
waves of
en
reflection
torno
on
a
this
este tema
historical
histórico.
subject.
La creciente
The
frecuencia y
growing
gravedad
frequency
de
and
las amenazas a la
severity
seguridad
of threats to
marítima,
maritime
la
security,
piratería y los
piracy,
actos
and
terroristas,
terrorist acts,
lo que incluye
including
ataques a
attacks
embarcaciones
on
civiles en alta
civilian
mar
vessels
y la
on the
comisión
high
de otros
seas,
crímenes
and the
y
commission of
actividades
other
ilícitas,
crimes and illicit
tales como el
activities such
tráfico de
as
armas o de drogas,
arms or drugs
requieren
trafficking,
una respuesta
require a
multilateral,
multilateral,
coordinada
coordinated
y la
response,
cooperación
as well as cooperation between states, international and regional organizations. Mexico recognizes the relevance of Security Council resolutions, which reflect concern about the situation in Yemen and in the Red Sea, and which highlight the need to protect the security of navigation and international trade. From Mexico's perspective, I would like to address three priorities in order to strengthen maritime security. One, we should give priority to technical and operational cooperation, the timely exchange of information, and the strengthening of regional rapid response mechanisms in order to mitigate the emerging threats to navigation, to international trade, and to the stability of supply chains, particularly in areas that are vulnerable or in conflict, where the lack of coordination or institutional capacity further worsens security risks, maritime security risks. Two, we endorse the calls for compliance with and implementation of the arms embargoes imposed by this Council. Three, we'd like to express our concern at the growing use of the right to legitimate defense in invocation of Article 51 of the United Nations Charter as a justification for the preventive use of force without the consent of the states concerned, particularly when there is involvement of non-state actors. Mexico has already addressed this dangerous reinterpretation of international law, which undermines the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity of nations and endangers the United Nations collective security system. In any event, the difficulties encountered in various parts of the world in maintaining security do not justify or call for recourse to the unilateral use of force on the part of another state. Indeed, it is precisely in this context where the international community must act collectively. President, we agree that the maintenance of maritime security is fundamental in order to guarantee the stability of global supply chains and global economic development. However, we underscore the fact that any action undertaken in this regard must fully respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the wishes of the coastal states, and in strict adherence to international law. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Mexico for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Spain.
Señor Presidente, España agradece a la presidencia griega la organización de este debate abierto que nos permite reflexionar sobre la relevancia de la cooperación internacional para el fortalecimiento de la seguridad marítima. El dominio marítimo es un espacio global esencial para nuestro presente y futuro. Más del 80% del comercio internacional transita por mar y el 99% del tráfico digital mundial lo hace por cable submarino. La mar conecta sociedades, sostiene economías y regula.